Hi, my name is Paul Stewart, and I'm here to welcome you to the Stephen and Harriet Myers Residence, a National Register-listed award-winning Underground Railroad historic site in the city of Albany, New York. What I'm going to do with you today is I'm going to take you on a tour of the Stephen and Harriet Myers Residence so you can see some of the features that are important in telling the story that is a part of this historic structure. What I'd like you to do is introduce you to Stephen Myers, first of all. Stephen Myers was an African-American man. He was born around 1800. He was born in New York during the period when New York was still a slave state and was progressively abolishing slavery. So that was the period between 1800 and 1827. So Stephen lived with the Yates family, and in that context he probably had an opportunity to learn to read and write. And he had a number of other experiences along the way. But in 1827, when New York abolished slavery, Stephen married Harriet Johnson. Harriet Johnson was the daughter of Abram Johnson, and the Johnson family was a very enterprising family. It had some connections with New York City, but was here in the city of Albany. Abram Johnson's son, John Johnson, was able to purchase with Abram around 1833 a sloop. And we know that in the subsequent years they seemed to do well with the shipping business between New York City and Albany. So Harriet Myers was certainly an eligible young lady around the age of probably around, no, I'm not sure what her age was, but she married Stephen in 1827. They were married in Troy by Reverend Steele, and over the next few years, some interesting things developed. Of course, we know that after 1827, there were some, not only was slavery abolished in New York, but there were some changes in the way that printing was handled, and there were a number of people that started to produce newspapers across the country. It became much easier to produce newspapers. So in 1831, we know that William Lloyd Garrison produced his newspaper, The Liberator. We also know that in 1831 there was a major slave rebellion in Virginia, and there were a number of things where events began to turn. And Stephen, as early as 1831, was helping people in connection with the Underground Railroad. So we know that in 1831 as well, there were some other newspapers that had started. Well, by 1841, Stephen Myers was involved with a number of other people who produced a newspaper called the Northern Star and Freeman's Advocate. And so in 1842, and for a number of years thereafter, the Northern Star and Freeman's Advocate was published in Albany and was really marketed all around the Northeast, in Philadelphia, in Boston, in Buffalo, and numerous other places. So Stephen continued to work on behalf of the poor and the oppressed, those who were fleeing enslavement, and in the late 1840s he was involved in something called the Florence Farming and Lumber Association, which was an economic development venture, and in the later in the 1850s he was involved with the New York State Suffrage Association, a voting rights organization, and all along he was involved with the what were called the Colored Men's Conventions, the convention movement, where black men and sometimes black women got together to map out strategies for developing schools and other sorts of projects that would be helpful for the betterment of African Americans in the period following slavery in New York, so that people began to become more developed and have more opportunities. So Stephen Myers in the Civil War was a person who was involved in recruiting people for the U.S. colored troops, and after the Civil War he had a couple of other positions, but he continued his involvement with the convention movement, and finally he died in 1870. So from 1800 to 1870, spanning the Civil War, Stephen had an opportunity to see a lot of changes with regard to slavery and he probably died with a lot of hope about how things are progressing for African Americans at that time. Seeing slavery fall in New York and in a number of other states as well. So that's Stephen Myers. And now Stephen Myers and Harriet Johnson lived in this house at 198 Lumber Street, it was at that time, in the 1850s. And we're going to talk about that just now. This is the flyer that's known as the Vigilance Committee flyer. And as you can see, it has the address of 198 Lumber Street. And if you look over the flyer, you can see that Stephen Myers' name is prominently displayed on the flyer as one of the key people, actually listed as the superintendent of the Underground Railroad. And it's one of the pieces of evidence that led us to identifying the Stephen and Harriet Myers residence, the building that we call the Stephen and Harriet Myers residence, and helped us get it on the National Register of Historic Places, and helped us get funding to be able to repair the building, as the building was in terrible shape when we first came to it in 2004. So this is the Schuyler Flats Memorial. It is a sculpture that was created by Dee Dee McCullough, who was a Philadelphia artist. When she heard about the discovery of the people who had been buried at Schuyler Flats, an area north of Albany in the city of Menands, or in the village of Menands, the story is that the Schuyler family, who was a large landowner in the area, had a number of people enslaved, and those people were buried about 3/4 of a mile away from the Schuyler's summer home in Menands. And so when the home was traded off to the town of Colony for a park, many years after they lived there, the people who were buried there had been forgotten about. And so for 200 years, no one knew or paid recognition to the fact that there were people buried in that spot. So these folks were discovered in 2005 when the town of Colony was digging a trench for a sewer alongside Route 32. And as they dug the trench, they suddenly found they were bringing up bones. And so they had to stop work and call in a state archaeologist to come in and take a look and evaluate what was going on there. They didn't know at first whether these were bones from the long past or whether they were recent bones. If they were recent bones, who knows what that story might have unfolded to, but they were ancient bones, bones from long ago. They recovered 14 sets of remains from the burial site, and the site was basically in somebody's front yard and alongside a driveway, and so they recomposed the area afterwards, and they do believe there may be other people buried there, but they don't want to disturb those graves. They want to leave them right where they are. So this sculpture tells the story of the 14 who were recovered, and as you can see on the side wall here, there are a number of boxes, and these are the boxes that people were reburied in. So there was a call for artists. People in the community created these burial boxes, or ossuaries, and then there was a very nice ceremony, and the folks were reburied in 2017. The sculpture is made of wood and copper and ceramic and stone, and you can see there are images made up representing the people who were reburied, adults and children, and also it is decorated with these symbols, which are called West African Ndinkra language symbols. And the one that is most important thematically for the reburial was the Sankofa. There are several different representations of a Sankofa, but this is one of them with the heart with the little squiggles. And it means it is not wrong to retrieve what you have forgotten, which is a very appropriate theme for the reburial. So we really want to thank Dee Dee McCullough for leaving this artwork with us here in Albany. We thought it was connected because Stephen Myers had been enslaved in the region, and these folks had been enslaved in the region, and we thought that was a good connection. So, they are passed away, and we honor them with this sculpture and with the story and retelling the story as well. There's a lot more we could tell about that, but you'll have to come to the Stephen and Harriet Myers residence to hear about it. One of the great features of the Stephen and Harriet Myers residence is the work that has been put into it by volunteers of all sorts and also teens in our Young People's program that we do primarily over the summer. One of the works that the young people have done, the teens have done, is to create this mural, which we call the Seeking Sanctuary mural. It's part of an exhibit we call Seeking Sanctuary, which shows the relationship between the sanctuary movement, people seeking sanctuary, and the Underground Railroad. Two basically very similar concepts that go together very well. And so this mural has a timeline which runs from this first floor all the way up to the third floor, and it also has lots of special feature items on the wall, posters, photos, some newsletters, some other kinds of representations. And of course, the mural itself is the larger paintings that are done in thematic sections. For instance, this one having to do with enslavement and people who were enslaved coming to the New World. And so we think this Seeking Sanctuary mural is an important something that people would want to come and see, a feature. And it tells a lot, and you could stop at any number of places along the way and tell a story. There's a timeline that starts in 1741 with a slave rebellion in 1741 and then goes all the way up to the 21st century. The mural was supervised by a professional artist. The young people worked in small groups. There were a number of groups, and they worked on different sorts of things. But this particular group called itself the Abolition Artist Mural Group. And they did the Seeking Sanctuary front piece, which says a sanctuary is a space you can go to feel welcome and protected. Throughout the centuries, people, old, young, near, and far, have not only sought out refuge, but also fought for it. Throughout this installation, you will see examples of groups and individuals who fought for and looked for sanctuary, not only for themselves, but for others in need, where you're standing has been and always will be a sanctuary for those willing to seek it out. So tell us, what does sanctuary mean to you? And that's the question that they put to you as a viewer and reader and visitor. And so think about that. What does sanctuary mean to you, and how does it fit in? One of the stories featured on the mural is the story of Charlesnall. He was an individual who had escaped from slavery in the 1850s and made his way up into this area and settled in the city of Troy, which is about 9 or 10 miles north of Albany. Charlesnall got himself work, and he was working for Uri Gilbert, who was a coach manufacturer, and while he was out running an errand, one day he was grabbed under the fugitive slave law and taken to the U.S. Commissioner. And what ensued after that was a kind of considered to be a riot, but the rescue of Charlesnall, where hundreds of people came out on the street to assist in getting him away from the U.S. Commissioner and helping him to make his way to freedom again, a second time. So that's one of the many stories on this timeline. There are individual points along the way, and the young people who were involved in creating this mural had to learn a little bit about each of the stories, and they often said, "Oh my gosh, I've never learned stuff like this in school." They were very, very impressed. So it was a really great experience for them. This painting of Stephen Myers is by Scott Foster, who was a professor of art at Siena College in Loudonville, New York. And the folks at Siena College have been very helpful to us over the recent years in doing a variety of things. And they actually worked with us to create a play that told the story of Stephen Myers and a number of the other characters from that time period. Scott Foster used painting techniques that were similar to what would have been used at that time and paint appropriate from that time period to create a portrait that would communicate something of Stephen Myers in a way that was different than simply the cutout that we have downstairs. We thank him for that. We have a very special exhibit that we've done on the second floor of the Stephen and Harriet Myers residence in one of the back room. We've converted it into a very elegant display space, and one of the elements in what we're representing here, we actually put on a display which we called "Yours for the Oppressed." It's kind of, the name is taken from the signature that Harriet Myers placed on a letter that she wrote to William John Jay, the grandson of John Jay, the first Supreme Court Justice. The Jay family was very much involved in abolition work, and so they had sent people and money to the Myers to help them with the work of the Underground Railroad. And this is a representation of Harriet Myers done by Danielle Colin, who is a local area painter and poet and performer. And it's a fictional representation of Harriet Myers against the backdrop of this letter that we were talking about. And she's carrying under her arm a copy of the Northern Star Freeman's Advocate newspaper, which is the newspaper that she is known to have worked on alongside of her husband, Stephen. And so it is a very elegant painting. And I'm going to share with you the letter that Harriet Myers wrote to William John Jay. It says, dated August 20th, 1860, and again, another witness to the fact that this is an important Underground Railroad story because it's connected with the Myers who lived here in the mid-1850s. And of course, this letter was written from another address where they lived at 10 Lark Street. Mr. William J. Sir, the two fugitives arrived here that you sent, and I sent them immediately on their route for Canada. In this month, we have had 10. We have sent on the two that you sent, sir. They said they had some money with them that you had given them, and they had enough to get to Canada. But the others who came had none. Mr. Myers is not at home. He is at Lake George this season as a butler. And you see, sir, I have to attend to the fugitives myself, as I was very thankful that you sent some aid, for it was a Saturday that they came, and it would have been difficult to get money for them on that day, as it is hard to get money for the fugitives. It seems that the prejudice against our class grows stronger every day, and yet we have a few good friends that feel for the bleeding slave that comes panting at their door. I thank you for all the favors you have done for the downtrodden that come to this office. May God bless you and your posterity. Yours for the oppressed, Harriet Myers. So you can see that she is an outstanding and strong person who is carrying on that freedom tradition of providing food and comfort and shelter to those in need. And so Harriet is a very important figure in the overall story. So I'd like to thank you for spending time with us today at the Stephen and Harriet Myers residence. We're finishing up here in the library, which is a place where we're creating a library. We have lots of books on the Underground Railroad, the Civil Rights Movement, African American history. We have a number of books on gardening as well, because we have a rather aggressive gardening project at 190 Livingston Avenue, just a few doors away, where we grow lots of flowers and vegetables and use an open garden model. We also, in this library, have some archaeological artifacts which are on display. We have a very active archaeology program where we work with young people in the summer in collaboration with another historic site, and we work with junior high students to do archaeology on nearby properties. We also have done a good deal of archaeology on this property, and like I mentioned, there's another lot a few doors away that we call the Thomas Elkins lot, which Thomas Elkins was another one of the figures on the Underground Railroad flyer that I showed you from downstairs. And we also have, connected with this library, a large number of handmade garments, which are reproductions of 19th century clothes, and the teens who have worked with us in the past have used those clothes to dress up and do performances. Some of them were used for the play that I referenced, from that Siena College worked with us on. So there's a whole bunch of things here in this space that are important for helping communicate the story of the Underground Railroad. And that's certainly a lot of what we do through all of the things that we do, through doing the tours of the building and telling the story of Stephen and Harriet Myers, but also through working with young people, with teens and junior high students, and also working with adults on doing archaeology or other kinds of things that would help communicate the story. And we like to focus on the local story of the Underground Railroad as a first place of departure. So the story of Stephen and Harriet Myers and Thomas Elkins, William Henry Johnson, Abel Brown, Lydia and Abigail Mott, and a number of other people that were important in the 19th century. So thank you very much for visiting with us today. Thank you to the library for kind of encouraging this project and making it possible. And we look forward to you and your visit at the Stephen and Harriet Myers residence at 194 Livingston Avenue in Albany, New York. If you go to our website, undergroundrailroadhistory.org, you can register for stopping in. Of course, during this time period, we have COVID protocols in effect, so you are required to wear a mask. We do like to, if you're in the same household, that's an easy tour. If you're from different households, sometimes we like to make sure that you keep your distance. We welcome you to visit at the Stephen and Harriet Myers residence, and we look forward to seeing you. Thank you very much.